Hi guys, welcome back to Life Education's podcast. We're here today with Petrina Barber. Petrina has a very kind of inspiring story about undergoing 5 years of cancer treatment and recovery.
Mm-hmm.
We came across your story in an article in The National.
Yeah.
So we wanted to sort of reach out to you and bring you along just to talk to you and pick your brain on what it takes to sort of what your interpretation of dealing with adversity and how your whole journey has changed.
Yeah.
So do you want to just begin, just give like a brief rundown of the last 5 years?
Sure.
And we'll just go from there.
So I think the broader picture, and to give context, is I've essentially been sick for coming up to about 5 years. In July 5 years ago, I was diagnosed with a late stage of cervical cancer. And there was just a catalogue of errors and disasters and unlucky mishaps that unfortunately it went on for quite some time until they found it, and it had spread. And my son was 4 months old at the time when they found it, so it had been growing while I was pregnant. So there was kind of the complexity of being in your early 30s. We were living in New York at the time, kind of flying very high on the career ladder, working in corporate New York, and being a new mother and having a baby, and being told that you have a very late stage of cancer and that you're probably going to die. So that in itself was very harrowing news. And you don't, well, at the time I didn't know anyone who got cancer in your early 30s, and you think that these bad things happen to other people, not you, and certainly not kind of in the prime of your life. Well, what I thought was the prime. So we had all of that going on, and they basically said to me, if you don't start treatment straight away, you're going to die. So I went straight into a really aggressive treatment plan. We did some quick surgeries because there were fertility issues with the type of cancer that I had, but I had just had my child, and so they really didn't want me to do any fertility preservation. It wasn't something that was forced on me, it was a choice, but it would have delayed treatment. So I did some surgery, and then we went straight to a radiation chemo plan. And, at the time, I've always had a really strong mindset, and I think it's because I was very ambitious for myself when I was younger, just in my career, and I had lived in Singapore and London, Hong Kong, got to New York with my company, and it was very competitive. And so I really thought that, okay, I've got cancer, it's harrowing, but it's going to be another thing I deal with. And I'm going to be one of these people who I'm going to raise some money for charity, and I'm going to run 10K, and I'm going to go to work during my treatment. And I was very optimistic about it. And I was actually a vegan before I was diagnosed. And so I felt that all of these things were an accumulation that I was going to get through the process. And it absolutely kicked my ass really, really badly. I had radiation every single day. And then I had chemo on top of the radiation every week. And it just broke me. And before your eyes, you're not eating anymore, you're throwing up, you're very sick, you're kind of all of those things that, you imagine kind of cancer and treatment associated to be. And so I wasn't running anything. I couldn't get out of bed, I couldn't walk. My husband was brushing my teeth and washing my hair, and I dropped down eventually to about 100 pounds. And I was in a wheelchair or in hospital, and I had a variety of infections. I had heart issues. My heart rate dropped to around 28 quite frequently and would just stay there. So they often had me hooked up to the crash carts because they never knew at any kind of given point whether my heart was just going to go out. So that was my life for many, many months. And my husband was raising my son. And I really had nothing to do with my son, not because I didn't want to, obviously, but because I was kind of in and out of consciousness and in an incredible amount of pain and on opiates and steroids and chemo and radiation. and it's just like it's a conveyor belt. So your body doesn't belong to yourself anymore. It belongs to medical science, and they just push you and wheel you into rooms, and you get on with that. So it was a very difficult time for everyone. And when it finished, that was kind of when my recovery period began. I think, having spoken to others about this, the thing that I've noticed in terms of the transition out from the critical surgical world into the transition of real life, there's a real lack of support there. And it's almost like one day you wake up and they go, okay, we're done, off you go. And you're left there standing saying, well, what's next? Like, who helps me? And your life is shattered and you're not quite sure where to start to pick up these pieces again. And you got to figure that out yourself. And that is originally 5 years ago, roughly the same time that I got onto Instagram, which was this kind of new app that no one was really on. And I just felt, okay, there's got to be some people out there. There's got to be someone to connect with, because I don't know anyone. I can't talk to anyone. No one's got the same problems as me. People are wondering what to wear on Friday night and what bar to go to. And, I'm wondering if my life's ever going to be the same again. All of these dreams and ambitions I had for myself and my family, they're gone. So what now? And so really that was kind of coming out of that. And I just didn't find the right support. And so I did everything myself in terms of kind of my own education. And the whole name that I created, My Ultimate Health Project, was because I decided that for 12 weeks I was going to trial something different every week for a 12-week period to see. I don't know why I picked 12 weeks. I mean, I feel like it's like a fitness thing. Yeah. But that was all I knew. So I picked 12 weeks. And I trialed something. And so 1 week I trialed gratitude. 1 week it was Thanksgiving in the US. And so it was about like giving thanks and appreciation, similar to gratitude, but like kind of more tied into that theme. 1 week was like fitness. Another week was juicing. So it was that kind of stuff. Like I was just really experimenting and trying and writing about my own personal experience and how I was finding these things help me in my recovery. And I did that for 12 weeks. It was an interesting experience because I was kind of sharing that and putting that out there. But once that 12-week period was done, and I got at that stage the all clear from cancer. So that was when they said, like it's called no evidence of disease. And so for everyone else around me, everyone was like so happy, and it was very anticlimactic for me. And not because I wasn't grateful, but simply because I was still ill and I still didn't know what my future held. Like maybe the cancer was gone, but I didn't know what was left of me. And that's the only way that you can really describe it.
And if you were the same or different and how much you changed, right?
Yeah.
I know I had like similar questions, like who was I now?
Yeah.
Am I the same? Can I fit into the same person? I felt, sorry to interrupt you, that it was like I had loads of pieces of a puzzle and I was trying to put them all back together. And what I found was that none of them fit exactly the same. The whole landscape was very different.
Yeah.
And accepting that is like another wave of interest.
See, I wish I'd met you 5 years ago. That's exactly the kind of conversation that you need to have. Like the way I describe it is my life was shattered. So it's like your jigsaw puzzle. There's these pieces, they don't fit back together anymore. So I kind of explained about my son as well, but I wasn't a good mother because my son didn't know me because I'd been in hospital for so long. So I felt like a failure. So the basic thing that you're meant to be able to do when you have a child is like be a good mother. So he didn't want to know me. I felt like a failure as a wife. I felt like I'd let people down. And like that sounds very strange for other people to really truly comprehend. But for me, I felt like I've let people down because I got so sick. This body has failed me. And I didn't know that I was good at anything anymore because I wasn't a good wife, a good mother, a good friend. So the only thing that I knew that I was good at was my job. So I went back to work and I got myself signed off really early. and I went nuts.
What was your job?
So I worked in corporate America. I worked for the largest asset management firm. And I used to run all of their, so they're an investment business, and I used to run all of their recruitment for the investments function globally out of New York. So I just had a job where, you know, New York is crazy. It's kind of fun, but it's not. It's crazy. But I also had the opportunity, because I had such a big role, that really you can expand your role as much as you want, and no one's questioning why you're working 16, 18 hours. And so I just never went home, and I just worked. And, you know, I just like did my job, and I just blocked everything out. And then in the meantime, I exercised like an absolute maniac, because I didn't know any other way. So it was all like HIIT, aggressive cardio. And honestly, I just hated myself. And I just like, and it's taken me a really, really long time to first of all recognize that, because I put it out there as very positive. So I masked it all by saying, this is like a very positive way to live. I'm being very strong. I have a really strong mindset. And I'm not denying that there was an element of that, but I think I was really masking just the pain, and just how disappointed I was that things had not worked out how they were meant to work out. So I really punished myself, and I was really quite horrible. And I carried on like that for quite some time. And then eventually my body just kind of was going through different things as well. And I was diagnosed with issues around radiation damage and chemo damage. And so those things are lifelong, so they're never going to go away for me. And since then, my journey's been kind of very up and down, peaks and troughs, being in and out of hospital. Last year was a particularly bad year for me. I had several surgeries on my bladder because the organ's damaged from the radiation. And then I had really serious bowel issues, which started last year and then culminated in surgery this year. Just to go back to my other point, eventually it caught up with me at work, and I eventually had to leave my job. And that was another really sad day for me, because again, I felt like it was admitting I'm not even good at this anymore. I can't even do my job. And I was actually depressed for a little while afterwards. So again, I have had a great mindset, and I do have it, but I just feel like there needs to be more acknowledgement around the fact that we're all human as well. And it's the thing that I've learned is it's actually worse to suppress and deny your emotions. There's a difference between being a victim and, you know, being positive and optimistic versus suppressing your emotions, because sometimes things are rubbish, and it's okay to say they're rubbish. It doesn't mean that you're moaning. It's about if you wallow in that. So if you know that things are a bit rubbish, and you wallow and you give yourself 5 minutes and you move on with it, that's cool.
I think sometimes it doesn't take 5 minutes. It's a lot. It's longer than that for sure. But I understand what you mean. Like, I get that whole victim thing. I really think my sister, and Keith's heard me talk about this before, but my sister, when she came to see me after my accident, she was like, "You're in the mud." And I was like, "Yeah, this is the mud." And I was like, "I'm just shit right now. Yeah. Everything around me, in my eyes, is shit. Like, we're just going to be here." And my sister was like, "All right, we'll be in the mud. Like, things are shit." And I think when you get to a process where like, okay, I'm ready to leave the mud.
Yes.
Then you can leave the mud. But
yeah,
I think it's true. Like, you can't suppress that stuff. You got to just be honest.
Yeah.
And like, things are bad right now. This is where I'm at. Like, I'm going to talk about it or not. But yeah, it's an important process. Just hearing you talk, I just like relate a lot to certain segments of this journey of yours.
Well, you know, I like found out about your story. I relate to your story so much because I see so many parallels and similarities just in terms of kind of your journey as well.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think potentially a lot of people who go through something like a physical journey that they go through that's very challenging probably go through a lot of the same steps, where it's like things are really shit, I feel better,
Yeah.
and then like feeling very just like, who am I?
Yeah.
What am I doing? What is my life about? Like,
Yeah.
who is this person? Am I the same? Am I different?
Yeah.
Like, I was very different. So I can imagine you coming out of that being like very different, being in denial too.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
like
absolutely.
beasting yourself
Yeah.
when actually you should have done the opposite. Like, be nice and kind.
I like look back and like I just think if I had seen a friend or a family member do what I did, it was like my mother was watching from the side, because my mother basically raised, because my husband was running a business and he had to work a lot because he had put so much on hold. He was at the hospital all the time with me, like raising my son. So he was kind of doing his thing. So my mother was raising my son, and she was watching all of this go on, and I like talked to her a bit about it now, and like for her, like it broke her heart, because, and you know, my son and my mother have the closest relationship now, and we always say it was because it was just those two, you know, and my husband and my son are super close. But you know, once I kind of got through this period where, you know, the biggest thing for me was I sat there and I thought, well, you know, what, just because my life hasn't worked out the way that I thought that it was going to work out, what is it that I want from my life? And the biggest thing was I couldn't continue with my job because it was just crushing me. And there was nothing to do with the job at the company. It was just not what I needed. And the biggest thing for me was I did not have a relationship with my son, and I refused to look back on my life and feel like it wasn't for him. He was a child. It was for me to rebuild that relationship. But I was scared and I was terrified, because every time I put myself out there, he rejected me. And again, you know, going back to having the right people around you, like I didn't have the right people around me. I didn't have the support of people who'd been through these kind of physical transformations and who were also dealing with these things as parents, because I do think that that's a slightly different complexity. And you know, I just woke up and I was like, it doesn't matter if he rejects me till the end of time. Like, I'm the parent. I have to do it. Like, this is what I want for our lives, and it's my responsibility. It's not his responsibility. And it was actually one of the reasons that we moved to Dubai a couple of years ago as well, because my husband was kind of looking at me and he was like, right, enough's enough. We need a completely different lifestyle, because wherever we had lived before, you know, we'd always lived in big cities, big jobs, like everything was crazy. And so we essentially moved to Dubai, and he has his own business, and it's, let's take it down a notch so we can kind of focus on, you know, our family. And my husband has his business here, and I've really, really invested in me and my son. So
can I ask you something?
Yeah.
What, out of that whole experience, what do you feel like was the silver lining? What did you, as a human, as a woman, as a mother, what did you learn from that?
I think it's probably, I mean, there are lots of things that I've learned, but the thing that I hope that I can teach my son is how to have patience for yourself, how to live with compassion and kindness, not just for yourself, but other people, and really understand where other people are coming from. Because it's really all too easy to not understand a person's reaction. And a lot of the time, sometimes it's nothing about like the issue that you're talking about or what's going on. It's about something else that's greater, that's bigger in their life.
Do you feel like people will like that with you?
I feel like people, and I get this quite a bit, and the biggest, it's not an issue, but it's a challenge that I face in trying to get people to understand my circumstances, that, you know, people think, oh, but you don't have cancer, so what's the issue? Or, you know, I've had...
You mean now?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So it's about trying to understand and empathize with people, because, yes, I don't have cancer, but I have serious issues relating to the cancer treatment, for which I've, you know, I lived in hospital for 2.5 months earlier this year. I stopped eating for 3 months. I starved myself, and then they kept me alive by feeding me intravenously because I couldn't eat anymore. So, yes, the cancer's gone, but are you telling me that that's better? And my son was in Dubai and I was in London. So it's not a criticism of people, but it's really what I have learned is a greater empathy to what people are going through. And I really hope that my experience is something that I can teach my son in order to be really more understanding and sensitive, because I do feel that it's what we need more in the world.
How would you, looking back on it now, how would you have, in this particular situation, how would you have wanted people to react to what was going on in your life? How would you have wanted them to treat you so people know?
Yeah. I really, the first time from the cancer experience and the recovery, I really hid away. And I don't think I gave people a chance. I felt like I wasn't doing it right. I don't know what I expected of myself, but I felt like I wasn't doing it right. And then this time round, I feel that what I've done is, I have a 5-year run rate and a 5-year lead on surrounding myself with the right people and getting the right support in place. So this surgery has been incredibly hard. This recovery has been incredibly hard. I would say it's been just as hard as the cancer treatment. And I have the right people in place to support me, not just from a friendship point of view, but also in terms of, a physical, mental rehabilitation approach. And I allow those people to help me. Whereas before, I would walk around and I'd be like, I'm fine. And I was not fine. So I feel like, I'm not one to, although I'm talking now, but typically I'm not one to overshare unless me as a very close friend. And I let those people talk to me more. And I think that's important.
And do you think you were quite withdrawn from people originally because you didn't want to bother them, or you didn't want to look like you weren't able to cope with it?
Yeah, to be honest, being vulnerable here, I still feel that way now. I feel like a burden. I really do. But the difference between then and now is I still feel like I'm a burden, but I'm able to say that and realize that is something that I feel. It doesn't mean it's real.
Yeah, fair.
And this is a big difference between the two recoveries as well. I'm learning that just because I think something, it doesn't make it real.
Yeah.
And a lot of the time we forget that our thoughts aren't real. So we become our own limiting factors.
Is that, going back to the empathy thing, do you think that that's something that's yours or something that's external? Do you feel like people reacting unempathetically, or is that something that you feel to your current situation of, I don't have cancer currently, but I'm still dealing with the repercussions of the treatment?
Yeah, it's a me thing, for sure. I think, I don't want to overstate the empathy with other people, because I've actually been very lucky in life to, typically on the whole, have a lot of positivity around me. But the problem is when, my mindset was, all I did from when I was about 15, 16 was I want to get to London. I'm going to work here. I'm going to do this. I'm going to have this big job. And that's all I did. I just worked and I just achieved. And if I did fitness, it was to do it for a reason. It wasn't oh, isn't this lovely? Isn't this kind of nourishing my body or my soul? Everything had a practical application, a practical purpose to get yourself there.
And not the pleasure and the enjoyment of
yeah,
I'm going to go for a run because it's just nice.
Yeah. And I loved my life though. Don't get me wrong. I don't look back and think, oh wow, I wasn't living. Now I'm living. I loved my life. It was a great life. But I just think I've learned so much more about adaptation and pivoting, and the reality that we have plans for ourselves, and very rarely it works out. And if you can't adapt and change and pivot, then you're going to be pretty miserable.
The adapting and the changing and the coming out of that mindset. It's really interesting when you use the word victim before, because I felt like there's a certain time where those things, it's okay to be in that place, and then then you have to transition out, not for other people, but for you. Because if you stay there, then it starts to be your limiting thing and not other people's thing.
I totally agree.
So that definitely has to be a place where you need to pivot out of that mindset. Okay, I'm in a new phase of whatever it is that I'm going through. It's time for change. How do I do that? How do I get my mind in that place?
I agree.
It's fucking hard.
It's really hard. And you know what's interesting? I had breakfast with a friend a few weeks ago, and he's seen me on 3 different stages, and he does not for 1 minute think I'm a victim. But he turned around to me and he said to me, "Who do you think you are?" And we're having this like nice breakfast. I mean, I wasn't eating much because I can't after the surgery, but we're having this nice breakfast, and we have these types of conversations. And he was like, "Well, who do you think you are? Like, who are you? Like, without the cancer, without the chronic illness, without the bowel surgery, without the mindset and the things that you've done the last 5 years, who are you?" And I just thought, wow, like, again, he doesn't think I'm a victim, but there comes a point, and I think, again, trying to draw comparison between my first recovery and my second recovery, I feel so much better placed to be in a position to be able to feel that I can answer, not necessarily to everyone else or even to him, it was a rhetorical question, but to myself, because I feel much calmer, and I feel I feel more worthy, if there's such a thing, like, to this time round. Like the last time round, I wasn't a victim, but I just couldn't make sense of everything. I couldn't piece it all together. And this time, things have been, there were some really dark days. I mean, I keep alluding to it, but maybe just to kind of say, so very specifically, I was diagnosed after cancer treatment with radiation damage to my bowels. And essentially what that meant was that there is parts of my bowels, pretty much all of it, which is formed into scar tissue, and so that causes issues for several reasons, because peristalsis stops happening, and then over a period of time, obviously, peristalsis will stop happening, but then your bowel just completely closes up. And I have always kind of had symptoms on and off for 5 years, and things really, really went downhill probably around October 2018. But I have food sensitivities, and so I put it down to thinking that I was eating something. And then come November 2018, I was really ill, and I was in and out of hospital probably about 7 times in 5 weeks. I flew both in Dubai and in the UK, and I flew to the UK, which was meant to be a 2-day trip to take my son back for Christmas, pre-Christmas, to see some family, and ended up calling 999 at my mother-in-law's house, and I stopped breathing and was admitted to hospital. And so we spent the majority of December and Christmas in London and hospital. And by this point, I had actively started starving myself because I could no longer eat and I couldn't drink water either. So it was a real...
What would happen if you did eat?
I ended up in hospital. So I was in a cycle. So it worked out for about every 3 to 6 to 7 days, I was in a cycle. So day 1, I would go into hospital. Probably around like 3 days, it would clear because I'd be nil by mouth. I'd be pretty starving by this point, or dehydrated. I'd eat something. I'd maybe get another 3 days and I'd be back in hospital. And I was desperately trying to get back in to see some cancer specialists. So my care is all at the Royal Marsden in London, but it's also difficult in the medical world because technically I don't have cancer anymore. These are things as a result of cancer. So in terms of where you are on the priority list, you're obviously at a point where you are going to die from this issue, but you don't have cancer. So I was trying to get to this specialist, and eventually I saw him and was admitted into hospital in January, and I was in a really bad way by this point. And they put a PICC line into me and essentially said that I was not physically in a position to be able to survive the surgery. So they weren't going to be able to do the surgery on me, and they fed me intravenously for over 6 weeks. And the day they put in the PICC line, which is a line where you usually have it for chemo, but they fed me intravenously through it, so it was threaded through my arm and into my heart, and I cried because I was so relieved to no longer have to worry about food and eating and drinking. It was this weight had been lifted off my shoulders, and I was having terrible cravings, and my brain was doing some really odd things because essentially I was starving myself. And so I learned a lot around just really the place that your brain will go to try and just get you to eat something. And eventually all of that stabilized, and I was separated from my son and my husband. They were in Dubai. I was in London, and there were some really dark days for me. And I truly believe that my mindset got me through that. I without a doubt, I mean, I had great support. The surgeon was amazing. The nurses were absolutely phenomenal, like unsung heroes. But, you know, every day it was me, and I was very lonely. I had my friends, and people would come to see me. I didn't let everyone come and see me because it feels kind of weird, because you're really gravely ill, and it's not like you feel like you should be social and entertain people, but it's not like that. And it's lonely and it's hard because you don't have your family with you. And they refused to tell me when they would do the surgery, because they didn't know that I was going to be strong enough for it, and they didn't know that I was going to be a candidate for it. And so a lot of the time I lived in hospital, and I had to get my head round that I might have a PICC line for the rest of my life, which basically meant that for 16 to 20 hours a day, you are hooked up to a machine and you could not leave. So my son would be 15, 20, 25, 30, off to get married, and I would be on a PICC line. Like, I wouldn't be able to ever go and pick him up, drop him off, do anything, go to a concert without the PICC line. Like what kind of life is that? And I, did a lot of thinking, obviously, in amongst kind of the pain and the meds, and I really just thought about the difference between what I now feel is the difference between hope, and I don't feel that I'm a hopeful person. And the way in which I describe that is because I realized that if you hope for things, it sets your mind to thinking that there are things that are outside of your control. And I do think that there are some things that will just happen to you, but when it comes to hoping for better days, I just don't think that you can hope for them. I just don't think it's enough. I don't think that you'll get through, because you'll just end up feeling so powerless. And I really needed to regain some kind of power in a very strange way in my hospital bed. And so for me, it was really just around setting my mindset in terms of what makes me happy, what brings me joy, what do I have in my life, what am I grateful for, how am I blessed? And this was all the things I would think about all the time. And I just found, like, whatever I put out there, I got back tenfold from other people as well. And, it opened a lot of people's eyes as well, I think, because, to see someone that they love go through something, and, to really have such a strong, compelling message just in terms of, like, things don't look great for me, like, you're feeling sorry for me, but, like, look at me. I'm in a world-class hospital that people don't have access to. I have people looking after me. Like, I don't know what the future holds, but I have a husband, I have a son. I'm blessed. It's the way that you have to look at things. And if something happens, we'll deal with it. So, there were dark days, and there were some days where I would sit there and I would think, I didn't understand why I survived cancer. Like, I didn't understand, because it was still going on. And then, really, I think it's just, again, coming back to the faith that you cultivate in yourself, the blessings that you have in your life, and just, understanding that you're not limited by these things, that life is still out there and it's still open to you, and there's so much to be grateful for. And then I had the surgery on the 1st of March, and it's very hard recovery, and I'm only 10 weeks post-op now, and it's been a lot harder than I thought that it would be. But it's the second shot, 3rd, 4th, 5th for me. I don't know. I kind of lost count. But it's a gift.
You're a cat with 9 lives.
I know. I've like said that recently. I am. But I don't know why this time feels very different. Like, before, I've had a lot of surgery, and it's always to just try and maintain the balance. This one, there was a lot of complexity around food, particularly in this one for me. And I actually refused to start eating again in the hospital once they took me off the PICC line, because I hadn't eaten in 4 months. And I was scared. I was very scared.
What were you scared of?
The biggest thing was I was scared that if I ate and the same thing happened, it hadn't worked.
Right, I see.
And that was that was it for me. That was my shot. So if it hadn't worked, what then? So I was terrified. So I didn't want to prove it right or wrong.
Sure.
I just wanted to, and then the second thing was, like, once you've kind of gone through like a 4-month period of not eating, drinking, like, you're not bothered about food anymore. Like, food is the enemy.
Right.
It's like, and still now it's different. It doesn't cause the same kind of pain. It's not life threatening. But like, I'm flying back to the UK next week. I've got like other things going on. Like, I've been very ill. Like, food is still something where it's like, I'm trying to get my head around it because my body's not agreeing with it. And how you feel on the inside when you recover, and I'm sure you've experienced this as well, how you feel about yourself on the inside really overspills into how you perceive yourself as well, and all sorts of things around like body image, how you relate to the world, like just how you feel mentally. Because if you're in pain every day, it's like, it's conscious decisions that you're trying to overcome these things. But that's why this time around, like the first time, denial, horrible to myself. This time around, I have a rehab program. I have the right people in place. I'm not trying to push things. I'm not in a rush. I'm just trying to be good to myself. Yeah. I'm playing the long game.
Who are the people that you have around you now, like, without specific, like, you have a good doctor, you have a few people you speak to with a similar experience, you have, what is it you've got around you now that you didn't have back then?
So I think the biggest thing is that actually my surgical team are much better than previously. My surgical team in New York were great, but like this surgical team is another level, and there's an infrastructure there where they've put a team around, which includes a dietitian and also a physio. And essentially what they did was work with, I have a PT here who is doing my physio rehab program. And essentially that whole kind of network has linked up together. Cool. So the information which they need to gather on me, which is very specific to me and bowel surgery around kind of weight, what I'm eating, how I'm eating, timings. And then he's kind of overseeing and looking at mobility. I'm doing a lot more Pilates, like rehab, like before I was doing, very intensive cardio. And it's really just kind of going back to basics and building the building blocks. But I have the biggest thing for me, I would say, is kind of, I'm just going to kind of loop back onto the fitness world rather than the medical piece. But the thing that I had really learned was, you really have to find and seek out the best people in the industry, whether that's for rehab, fitness, what you want to achieve, because there's a huge differentiation of quality of individuals in the market. And the biggest priority, not just for me, for anyone, I think, disagree with me if you will, but I think people lose the focus of, let's be safe. Like, all of this stuff is like great, but if you're not safe, if you're not doing something properly, if you don't have it with correct form, like, you're never going to get to where you want to be anyway. And then worse than that, you could do yourself some serious harm, which is going to impact and limit the other things that you're doing in your life. And so I as I said, I work with someone he's been my PT now for about 18 months, and he's taken me through a lot. So he's taken me through maybe like 2-3 surgeries, blood transfusions, iron transfusions, all my bowel issues, bowel surgery. Like, he is super knowledgeable.
Who is it? Give me a little shout out.
His name's Chris Beavers.
Cool.
Yeah. He's I obviously I'm biased, but I don't think that anyone apart from my surgical team and my family care more about my health than he does. And that is what people need to get. When someone cares more about you than they do themselves, it's not about their ego, it's about you. That's what you need.
And do you find that, so this training 18 months compared to the original circuit classes and stuff you're doing? Yeah. Do you find you're more like optimistic and you enjoy it more? Yeah. And you're sticking to it more? Like, do you find there's actually like a physical difference in you being there and like how you overview exercise? Yeah.
But Chris has really helped me in this though. So when I first met Chris, I was like, okay, so let's do strength training, and then here are all the other things that I do, and I'm just going to beast myself outside of the gym. And, you know, he probably knows me better than I know myself. And, like, it's been a long process, because if you had ever turned around to me at the time, like, he understood. Like, for me, I was like, look, I've been through a lot. I'm so grateful to be alive. You have no comprehension what that's like, because I get to go running. I get to go spinning. I get to do this. And it was coming from a positive place. It just had negative associations around it, because I was very tired and worn out. And so instead of being like, no, don't do this, it was really a journey that we both went through together, in terms of, okay, well, how are you feeling? Like, what's going on with you? Like, how do you think that this is affecting this? What are you enjoying more? Are you enjoying this more? Like, how, you know, and actually he got me to see and understand that really, like, it wasn't kind of working for me,
Sure.
like what I wanted to do. And my priorities weren't matching up, because he said to me when we first met, he's like, what's your goal? I was like, to stay out of hospital. Like that, and that's 18 months ago to now, like, that's my personal goal. Like, if I can do other little things in between, I'd love it. But, you know, my ultimate goal is I want to stay out of hospital. And so what that means is about protecting my overall health. And so every time, like, we've done things or we've kind of gone off track, he's like, okay, well, how do you think it's fitting in?
Mm-hmm.
So it's, and you know, because this is what you do, right? But it's a journey with the client, and he's gotten me to a point now where, as I said, I feel like I've come back and I've been doing my rehab with him. And, you know, before I would have been this crazy person that I would have been like, okay, so now we're on week 10, like, okay, let's go. Week 11, what are we doing? What can I do now? You can sign me off. You can get me to do this. And he, like, I'm allowed to do, say, more running than I'm actually doing at the moment. Because some days I wake up and I'm like, nah, I'm not feeling it. And as I said, it's the long game now.
Mm-hmm.
And that's been a huge difference for me. Huge difference.
And did you actively seek these people to keep them around you, or did you is there something that just fell into place when you left New York and you moved to Dubai?
I had to find these people.
Yeah.
And it was, you know, when I say I probably have got the best people around me in the last 18 months, and this whole thing's been going on for 5 years. I don't know how you feel, but it's like, maybe it's like relationships. You've got to kiss a lot of frogs until you get to the right people. And, you know, sometimes, like, people say things to you, you're like, oh, that makes sense. But, like, you know, education is lacking, and I'm sure I get probably shouted at, but, you know, a lot of the time, sometimes people have one experience about themselves, whether it's health recovery, fitness recovery, whatever it may be, and they feel that is applicable to kind of everyone else. And I think that the really talented people in the industry are open, naturally curious, don't necessarily think that their method is the only method, that there's a combination of methods, and that every person is unique.
Yeah.
And every situation is unique.
Yeah, they're really, really valid points. Really valid points.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, look, I deal with people who are injuries and all sorts of stuff, and I've never even had a surgery myself, so I can't say, hey, this is what happened with me. So from my position, my default position is, right, I don't know what it's like, so you're gonna have to tell me.
Yeah.
I'm gonna have to learn as much as I can from you as to what's going on here. I don't know. Yeah, it's a strange thing. I mean, it's something that a lot of PTs can't relate to, is when you get to these complex levels of problems and challenges that lots of people maybe shy away from them, and it's all about working with the client.
Yeah, especially understanding that when you talk about you beasting yourself, like, I can relate to that so much, because
did you do that?
Yeah, of course I did that. Yeah,
because you went through the whole Pilates.
Yeah, but like
piece,
I beasted myself entirely, and I think it's hard to do that when you can't walk. But I would definitely, I would challenge myself a lot. Like, I couldn't walk properly for a really long time, and I would do it anyway, to the point where I'd go home and I was crying because my feet were so sore.
That's crazy.
And yeah, it's mental. Yeah. But I think for me it was coming from this place of, like, I need to prove to myself that I can do this because I need to be normal. Like it's a part of the old identity that I had. It was like the old version of me was this, and I have to find a way to that person. And the only way that I could do that was like just destroying myself to get to that place. I didn't realize that there was another path, but the path that I only knew was like, if I destroy myself this way, eventually I'm going to be able to walk, and eventually I'm going to find my old self back. I never found her because she was so different. It was like a totally new person. But that process of like, when you're sitting there telling me about beasting yourself, I was like, I still do that. What are you talking about? Like, I still do that. But I think it's definitely I need to find who I was. And that's like, whatever it is that you did before, that's how you find that person.
Can I ask you, just as a woman, how did you feel that you related to your body image? Like at the time when you're going through all of this and you're beasting yourself, like what did you think about yourself?
Mine was really different because I had this thing I was disabled, and then I was like scarred to shit. And at first I was because I did the same thing, I couldn't eat, so I lost a lot of weight, and I was very, very scarred. Like I had scars everywhere, my body was misshapen, so I was like, I'm like that in my mind, the Hunchback of Notre Dame. Like I had this misshapen pelvis, and everything looked so weird, and like I was so little and my legs were tiny, but then I had like weird bone structures that were everywhere that never used to be that way. So in my mind I was like, I'm the Hunchback of Notre Dame and I'm disabled and disfigured. Like I really felt that. And that's kind of the thing that I had, and I had to like dissolve that over time. But it was like, it's a really challenging process. It's not easy, and it's not easy to like now like show your body and this is it. Like I still hide my feet sometimes. Like sometimes when we do these podcasts, at the very beginning I was like, make sure my feet are not in this.
Really?
Yes. I wouldn't let I know now they're there, but like I wouldn't let anyone look at my feet.
Really?
I wouldn't let anybody touch them. I would hide them in socks all the time.
This goes back to what you said. I think it's just such an amazing point. What you think isn't necessarily what's real.
It's so true. For all of us though, you don't have had to have had an accident. Just because you think something, it doesn't mean it's real.
Oh well, like in my case, I knew it was real. Like I was disfigured and I knew it. I could see my feet and I knew they didn't look like feet.
The extent of how much Hunchback in Notre Dame and how ugly your feet were and the size of your scars, like, that's not real.
No. Because it doesn't matter to other people. Like when you say, look at my scars, it doesn't matter to you. So they just like, it's like a scar. But to me, it's like, this is my whole fucking pelvis. Like this is the whole side of my leg. So it's a very different thing. It doesn't matter to other people because it doesn't matter to them. So it's different. They see it differently. But that was hard to get through. I think the way that I came out of that, and then maybe I can ask you the same question, is coming alive again, finding a way to come alive. And I know that you were talking about doing that with your son, like reconnecting with him. For me, it was like, I need to find a way to come alive in my heart and soul. And if I can do that, I had no idea how to do that, but if I can do that, then I can bring everything else to life. And it's a process. I'm trying to get there slowly, like bringing myself to life, being authentic, doing what it is that I want to do, and not doing the things that are no longer me, and being okay with that. Like before that, I was teaching a lot of yoga, and after that, I didn't want to teach anyone yoga. I was like, I don't want to give you my energy because sorry to be so rude, but I didn't have any energy to give anybody. And then when I went back to it, it's not something that served me anymore. I didn't feel like it was me anymore. I didn't have that, like, this isn't me. I can't be inauthentic. So I don't know how other people do it who get to that place where they're recovering, but I know, like, I had to come alive, and I did that in very selfish ways. I was the most selfish person imaginable.
I think that's great though.
How was it for you?
Well, I think I probably already had the alive epiphany because of the cancer experience. So that's why this recovery has been different. And the thing that I've learned is, so I was telling you this weekend, so I just went away on a staycation in Dubai, and we're at this hotel, and I realized that I have this choice. So the reality is I have a scar. And it's pretty huge and big at the moment, and that's my reality. But the perception of how I think about myself and relate about my body, that's not necessarily real, because it doesn't look like how I would optimally like it to look like. But the choice is the feeling of being alive was, I was sat in that hospital bed, potentially not having this surgery. And I'm sat there and I'm worried about a bikini and a scar, and my son is there going absolutely nuts because he's going to go to Wild Wadi and he's 5 years old. And I'm like, let's do it. Like, this is amazing. It's like such a gift, like, to be here with my family. And I think it was really good for me, because I don't want to sit here and say, like, I'm not at a stage where I can tell you that, like, my scar is a battle that, like, I've lived through, or shows, like, and I have nothing against scars, but, like, this isn't about anyone else. And I think this is the point that you go back to about being selfish, because I think that is so important, because well-intentioned and well-meaning people are always kind of telling me things about, like, how they relate to themselves and feel about themselves, which is great, and I applaud it, because we should all try and get to that place where we feel alive. But you've got to do it for you, and you've got to get there yourself. So what I'm saying is, like, I'm not really at that place where I feel truly comfortable, but I went and did it. And I think it was good for me, because I'm not going to lie, there was a lot of staring, and it wasn't me being paranoid. Like, there's a lot of staring.
I know, it's horrible, especially here. It's like, I can see that you're looking at me. Stop looking at me.
Yeah. Someone tried to take a photo of me as well by the pool today. It was crazy, because he saw me walk past, and then he just could not stop staring. And then I was walking past again with my son, and luckily I had, like, my son's hat, and it wasn't because, like, I was covering up, but, like, I could see what he's doing with his phone. And we all live with Instagram, so, like, I know when I take pictures, like, not of other people, but, like, you take pictures, you can see when people are angling, and I was like, that guy's taking a picture of me. And so I had my son's hat, and I had it in front of me, but, like, it's just like you've got to accept it, like, and not for anyone else. So I could, like, spend 12 weeks, like, several months working with Chris, my PT, and, like, pop back up on Instagram and tell you that, like, now I love myself and I'm so worthy because I look a certain way, but it's just inauthentic and it's not me. And it's like, if you don't love your life now, here and now, and you don't find things that give you joy and purpose, like, what's the point? So
yeah, I mean, I know what you're saying, but it's a very different level.
Yeah.
What I've experienced compared to what you and both of you have experienced.
Yeah. So, and but it's quite funny, because actually, out of everyone, my son is the most open-minded about it all the time, because he sees my scar and he's like, "Is that why they cut the bad bits out of you?" And I was like, "Yeah, that's right." And he's like, "Oh, they did a good job." I'm like, "Yeah." That's how he sees it. It's funny. And, like, children are so, talking about authenticity, like, children will, like, say anything to you, they think, like, you're ugly, they'll, like, tell you you're ugly. Like, and he's like, "Oh, they did a good job."
That's good.
Yeah. And, like, again, I think, it was good for me. I'm not going to say it was easy, or that I am, like, super excited about getting back into a bikini again, but we live in Dubai. And, you just sometimes have to put yourself out there. And I've learned this as well. Like, you just, like, you can't hide away from your life. And, like, you've got to be a bit scared, and you've got to be a bit vulnerable sometimes to actually fail again. And I don't know if you felt like this, but after cancer, maybe that's why I repressed everything and I was in denial, because I was so scared of failing again. And I just couldn't. And then I was sick all the time. And, going back to being a burden, always feeling like a burden. And, like, you just, at some point, have just got to let it go, and just, you just really got to let it go.
Yeah, you do. That's the hardest part though, because
Yeah.
sometimes you define yourself on that.
Yeah.
Like it becomes a definition. Like I'm a cancer survivor, or I'm
Yeah.
like disabled, or like I don't know what you are, Keith, but you know what I mean. Like we have these labels that we define ourselves by, and it's like, okay, I need to. This is a new person that's coming forth.
Yeah.
Like, I'll tell you guys a totally separate story, but I've been a vegetarian for 23 years.
Yeah.
And recently I had all of these scans, and then I came to this conclusion where actually, like, my body wasn't building enough bones, so I'm like now transitioning into being a meat eater. 23 years being a vegetarian, being a vegan half the time. Like, so I was a vegan for 4 years. I was a raw vegan. So really, really, really like interesting. And then I've had this label on myself, like I am a vegetarian. That's who I am. That's a part of my identity. And then transitioning out of that to being something like, oh well, how do I move into a different space that's a new like version of me and a new identity, and trying to dissolve yourself of, okay, well, I'm not just this label, I'm not this victim, I'm not disabled, I'm not a vegetarian, I can be whatever it is that I want to be moving forward. Yeah, interesting.
Yeah. I'm going through exactly the same thing. It's the shift.
Oh, high five.
You're back to eating meat as well?
So I've done, so I've been vegan twice in my life. The first time was before I was diagnosed with cancer. And if you read anything about cancer, then they tell you if you're a vegan, you're never going to get cancer. But I got cancer. And then the second time was just before all of my bowel issues really kicked off. Because actually a lot of protein, like vegan sources of protein, are much harder to digest.
Yeah, and inflammatory.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then I've gone through a process of cutting out gluten, egg, and dairy, and that is something that I will continue.
High five, me too.
Oh,
That's yeah, I'm doing that, and including like bone brothers and stuff like that.
Yeah, actually, Happy in Dubai do the best bone broth.
I know.
Yeah,
I can't do red meat yet. I'm not there.
Try their mushroom.
Like, I've been doing the chicken. I can handle like chicken bone broth, and I ate chicken for the first time in 23 years.
That must have been crazy.
Yeah, it's mental. Like my stomach was like like having like a convulsion, but yeah, it's interesting. So
the mushroom one is good though, because as I said, I was vegan again last year, and so coming back onto, so I find food's really problematic for me at the moment. And I mean, kind of a bit like you were saying, it's also it's very interesting, like when you drop weight for medical reasons and then you realize you have to put weight back on, and then you're scared of food, like all of this stuff starts happening in your brain where it's not normal to be the weight that you are. But then you're like, well, I got to start eating. I don't know what to eat. What's going to not cause me pain? It's very hard shifting from what is familiar to the unknown.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, definitely. Especially when it comes to food, because it's such a personal thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, and so for me, I'm going on like this. I've eaten carbs my whole, like I'm basically a carb. I'm basically a potato, like a big giant potato. Yeah. Like eating loads of like veggies, but I'm a big giant potato, and going from that to doing like the total opposite, it's crazy.
How do you feel? Because so the biggest thing that I have found very sad in the last 3 weeks, so we were meant to do this podcast before, and then I had to rearrange, but I've taken out all vegetables and all fruits in my diet. And can you imagine? It was the saddest day of my life, because my life is built around like vegetables, nutrition, fruit, health. And it's just so sad, like accepting that your body like can't, and like, maybe it will be a phase, maybe it won't be, but like I just cannot do this to myself. And I was fighting it, and I was getting sick. I was ill. I'd have a bit of vegetables here and there. And just this mental blockage that you have, like to really transition off, because you're like, no, that's healthy. That's how I eat. I don't want to leave the vegetables.
Yeah, I think, look, from what I kind of experience, and I don't know if this is accurate or not, I think that there is so many different ways that like humans are omnivores at the end of the day, and there's so many different ways in that we can eat.
Yeah.
And we can eat as like Inuits, completely meat diets. We can live as vegans. We can live off raw vegans. Like there's a multitude of ways that human beings can live because we're very adaptable. And I think at the end of the day, it's just finding what's right for you and what works for you as an individual. Like if vegetables are not working for you, then being okay with that.
How do you eat?
Anyway.
Everything?
I'm fortunate.
Really everything?
At the moment, I'm fortunate enough. I don't eat pastries and cakes and stuff like that. Like I don't have a sweet tooth when it comes to like desserts and the beige kind of food, confectionery stuff. Yeah. But any sort of meat, fish, veg, all that, I tend to get away with.
You eat like gluten, dairy, egg.
I stay off gluten just because I've read a ton on it. Like.
Yeah,
I'll have a cheeky wrap every now and again. I'm not completely like, oh damn it, I can only go for that one gluten-free option on the menu. Yeah. But I don't eat pastas. I don't eat sandwiches. I don't eat baguettes. I don't eat just because of gluten. And different books I've read outlining the possible future problems that gluten can cause. I can just do without them.
Yeah.
Anyway, I think that's a whole other topic for a whole other discussion.
So let me just finish with asking you, if you had to, so we've already spoken where it is a process, you have to learn from your past and you have to build on the experience that you've had. What would you advise someone to shorten that as much as possible? They obviously have to go through their own journey and everyone's journey is different, but like, how would you make it as short and helpful for people in your situation?
Short circuit. First of all, surround yourself with the right people. So don't waste time hanging around getting people to tell you, medical people or anyone else to tell you what to do. You find the answers for yourself. You're responsible for yourself. You're accountable for yourself. People will help you.
Such good advice.
Yeah, people will help you and support you, but you have to be your advocate. No one else is going to care about you like you will. So seek it out. Get rid of toxic people. That includes friends where you talk about yoga. Like I haven't had that experience of teaching, but there is just energy that I can no longer give you. And it's sad, but again, it's like letting go of vegetables. Like that doesn't serve anyone. And so it's really around education, support, toxicity, and just being selfish and kinder with yourself. Like I feel like when I'm around people who have the similar mindset to me, it makes me want to be better. So yes, I have this mindset, but in the same way that hopefully I can get you to feel that that's contagious and I can give you some of my energy, I can get some energy off you and I can get some education off you and you teach me things. Like it's not just a one-way relationship. And so that's why like I feel like it's the support and, you know, having a friend who will turn around to you at breakfast and say, who are you?
Yeah.
And at least it makes you question, like, oh, actually, who am I? Anyway, thank you so much. It's been so inspiring to listen to you talk and talk about all of that. Thank you for being vulnerable and sharing your story.
Where can people follow your story? Are you active anywhere?
Yes, so I'm on Instagram at My Ultimate Health Project.
Cool.
Yeah. Amazing.
I wish you the very best of luck with the rest of your career. We'll have you back on soon with more success.
Love that. Thank you so much, guys. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.